This is the first in a series of videos where I'm going to be looking at some questions that have appeared on past AP World History exams. And what I want to do in these videos is just to look at the questions and to give you an idea of how to make an outline for the questions. So I always recommend when you're answering a question during the exam to spend the first 10 minutes writing an outline. So the purpose isn't to give you all the information you're going to need for the essay, but rather just to show you how you can make an outline for it and kind of point you in the direction of some things you can look for in this particular question. So our specific question here asks us to, it's a change in continuity over time question, and it asks us to analyze how political transformations contributed to continuities and changes in the cultures of the Mediterranean region. So the time period we're working with here is 200 CE to 1000. So first thing, when I'm thinking of a continuity and change over time question, I want to sort of make a timeline from the beginning to the end of the time period. So I'll just draw that here. And we want to think about what's happening around 200 CE here. So in the Mediterranean, 200, we're talking about the Roman Empire. So we'll get that on here. So if I'm writing the essay, I'm probably going to spend some time at the beginning describing the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire itself is not the focus of the essay. So the items that I end up writing about in the essay are going to be things that relate directly to the changes and continuities that I'm going to be writing about later on in the essay. So before I can write my introduction, I want to be able to plan out my entire essay and all the topics I'm going to touch on throughout the essay. So first, two very important changes that happen during this time period with regards to the Roman Empire or political control in the Mediterranean region is first the splitting of the Roman Empire into the Western Roman Empire centered in Rome and the Eastern Roman Empire centered in Constantinople, which would later become known as the Byzantine Empire. So this happens towards the end of the 4th century. Where are we here? So in the late 4th century here, we'll just call this the split of Roman Empire into East and West. And then, not too long after that, the date we usually see in history textbooks is 476. So with 476, we have the fall of the Roman Empire. So when we're talking about the fall of the Roman Empire, we want to be mindful that we're only talking about the Western Roman Empire centered in Rome. So the Eastern Roman Empire, which would later be the Byzantine Empire, continued for many hundreds of years after that. So the next thing we want to think about are the political transformations and what political transformations happened as a result of the fall of the Roman Empire, and earlier the split of the Roman Empire into East and West. So when I was reading student example responses from the actual AP exam, students tended to focus almost exclusively on Western Europe. So I think Western Europe is a good place to start. So we talked in some depth in this unit about the concept of the Dark Ages. And we know the Dark Ages are the time in Western Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire, but before the Renaissance. So the time in between those two kind of touchstone events in Western civilization. We also know this term Dark Ages is problematic because, especially from a world history perspective, because it really only applies to Western Europe. We know other regions in the world were experiencing much better times, golden ages during this period. So we talk about golden ages in China, golden ages in the Islamic world. You could also throw the Maya in the Americas in with that group. But the Dark Ages kind of mark a huge change in political structure in Europe. So we go from imperial Rome, which was a very centralized rule, to really political fragmentation. So we have the emergence of small kingdoms throughout Western Europe, and these small kingdoms, they didn't have the centralized control of the Roman Empire. They relied on what we can call the feudal system, or the manorial system. So we're going to look at these concepts, look at the idea of kings and vassals and serfs. And you might want to think about some of the changes. So, for example, slavery was extremely prevalent in the Roman Empire. So how is serfdom different than slavery? So there's a lot you can write about here. One thing you want to make sure that you also write about with Western Europe in the Dark Ages is the continued spread of Christianity throughout Western Europe. But also we want to think this question begins in the year 200, and in the year 200 Christians were still persecuted in Rome. So you might want to look at the development of Christianity in Rome. So eventually Christianity becomes a more accepted religion with Constantine. Eventually it becomes the official state religion of the Roman Empire. But we're also going to be really interested in what happens with Christianity and the Catholic Church during the Dark Ages. While individual kings become much less powerful in the Dark Ages, the Church itself becomes extremely powerful. Then at the same time, Christianity itself, the religion, is changing, is becoming adapted to local traditions. So we looked at this to some extent in the podcast. So we looked at the holiday of Christmas, for example, and some of the traditions of Christmas, how they were adapted to fit local conditions. So that's what's happening in Western Europe in a nutshell. You're going to want to expand on these ideas. And you could probably do well on the question just by writing about Western Europe, but one thing you want to be mindful of is this question is asking about political transformations in the Mediterranean region, so that entails more than just what's happening in Western Europe. So I alluded to the Byzantines earlier. I think really to answer this question, you do need to touch on the Byzantines, because it's the Byzantines much more than Western Europe who sort of carried the torch of the Roman Empire forward. So the Byzantines, you want to know about them? They considered themselves Romans. So they considered themselves to be the continuation of the Roman Empire. And the Byzantines were much more like Rome than Western Europe during the Dark Ages. So there's no feudal system in the Byzantine Empire. The emperors remained powerful. They had monopolies on industries. there was centralized rule. You have the continuation of Roman legal systems. So one thing you might want to look at is Justinian's Code and how that's a continuation of Roman legal traditions. You have the continuation of monumental building. So you don't have monumental building in Dark Ages Europe, or to much less of an extent. Whereas in the Byzantine Empire, you could write about the Hagia Sophia, for example. And you also have continuations in Christianity in the Byzantine Empire, but you could also look at how Christianity changed in the Eastern Roman Empire or the Byzantine Empire with the emergence of the Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And a major difference here with the Eastern Orthodox Church is the ruler of the church was also the emperor, so power was consolidated within one person. So we have a term for that that's very hard to pronounce. And hopefully I'm spelling it right on my timeline here. And this idea of having a ruler who's both the political and the spiritual ruler can also be seen in the Islamic caliphates. So early 7th century, we have the rise of Muhammad in Arabia, the rise of Islam, and shortly after or during his life and immediately following his death, we have Islamic conquests. So the Islamic conquests came to the Mediterranean region. So they came to North Africa, which is part of the Mediterranean region, and then all the way up into Europe, up the Iberian Peninsula into Spain. So starting here in the year 200, we know North Africa is under the control of the Roman Empire. And then it will eventually come to be under control of the Byzantine Empire. So the Byzantines carry on control of northern Africa, but sort of in a weakened state until the arrival of the Islamic conquests. So really for this particular question, I wouldn't spend a lot of time writing about the life and death of Muhammad, but I think you should definitely look at the arrival of Islam in North Africa and the spread of Islam up the Iberian Peninsula through Spain. So you can think about what you know about Islam. You can think of the 5 pillars of Islam. How did Islam change these regions? So like even today, the most impressive architecture in Spain, or some of the most impressive architecture, is Islamic architecture from this period. So what started as one group, the Roman Empire, emerges into 3 groups. We have or not 3 groups, but 3 kind of distinct topics. You have the Dark Ages in Western Europe, the arrival of Islam in North Africa and up the Iberian Peninsula to Spain, and the continuation of the Roman Empire in the East. So this should give you enough information to get started with the essay.